progress.
Good evening, friends. Agin Erev Shabbos. So this week the Shiurim on the Parsha are going to be tonight, Thursday evening. Tomorrow, 4th of July, we have a Shiur in Pesacheinu. The Shiurim tonight are dedicated by my dear friend Rabbi Aryeh and Michelle Jacobson, Leila Nishmas, Rabbi Aryeh's mother, Sarah Malka Bas, Rabbi Aaron Zechron Levracha, whose yahrzeit will be Be'ez Hashem Yud Gimel Tammuz, Mishal Meshav and Aliyah. She should be a Melitza Yishar for her family, for Simchas and Nachas, good health, Ad Bias Gold Tzedek. Tonight's Shiur is also dedicated by my dear friend Rabbi Kenny Pinsauer, Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Chukas as a Zechus for Klal Yisrael. Okay, Pesacheinu Megadim. We're connecting the beginning and the end of Parshas Chukas. There are a number of really amazing connections between the very beginning and end of the Parsha. The Medrash comments on the words Zois Chukas HaTorah. The Medrash says, this is a fulfillment of the pasuk in Eiv, Mi Yitain Tahar Mitame. Who can give purity and create purity from impurity? Loi Echad, only God. The Medrash is commenting on this unusual phenomenon of here you have somebody who's tameh, and a cow could make them tahar. You know, you would think the cow is not the first. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. A animal that says moo is the source of tahara. But only God could bring tahara from tumah. For example, Avraham from Terach, Chizkiah from Achaz, Yoshia from Amain, Mordechai from Shimi, Yisrael from the Oivdei Kechavim, Olam Haba from Olam Hazeh. Who could do this? Who could command this? Who could decree this? Only Hashem. So the phenomenon of the Paraduma, that it's Metaher the Tmeim, says the Medrash, brings to mind God's ability to create Tahara from Tumah. Well, here's another example of creating Tahara from Tumah. What about David from Moav? That's also an example of Tahara from Tumah. Guess how the Parsha ends? The Parsha ends, Vayisu b'nei Yisrael, Vayachanu be'arvois Moav, Me'ever liyarden Yerechai. The Shla HaKadosh says, the secret of the terminology, Arvois Moav, is to turn the bitterness of Moav to something arev. Arvois Moav, the sweetness of Moav. Moav is bitter, but we turn it sweet. How? We extract King David from Moav. In fact, the Shla HaKadosh says in Masechta Tainis, this is the inyan that Naomi said, call me Mara, when she came from the field of Moav. Why? Because the Moavim embittered life for her. She went to Moav, she lost her husband, she lost her 2 children. But the sweetness of Moav sweetened Naomi's bitterness of Moav through the extraction of David HaMelech. So, that's what Moav said, Ki chazak hu mimenu, ki atzum hu mimenu. That refers to Mashiach. Says the Shla, this is the secret of Arvois Moav. The bitterness will leave and remains masoik, sweet. So, I think that's a very compelling connection. The Parsha begins with the phenomenon of Paraduma, which the Medrash says bears to mind God's ability to bring purity from impurity. And the Parsha ends, Arvois Moav, sweetening Moav. And that's exactly why Klal Yisrael approaches Moav, because we're able to extract the klipa from the klipa of Moav, David HaMelech. By the way, the Roikeach says this is the only time in the whole Chumash the word Arvois Moav is spelled Male, Ayin Reish Beis Vav Taf. Arvois with a Vav. It's Male with a Vav. Why? So the Roikeach says something that's hard to understand. He said, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah to Klal Yisrael until the 6th of Adar, and he died on the 7th. So to indicate Vav, it says Arvois with a Vav. But why is this the only time it says Arvois Male? I would humbly suggest, the Zohar HaKadosh says the letter Vav is the letter of life. That's why in the genuine Tachnun that the Sfardim say, LeDavid Hashem Nafshi Esa, which has a pasuk corresponding to each letter of the Aleph Beis. There's no pasuk corresponding to the Vav. And the Zohar says, because when you say Tachnon, what you're doing is, you're being Moiser Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. You're giving up your life, so there can't be a pasuk for the Vav. Therefore, the letter Vav is the letter of life. Also, the Zohar says, when it says Vayasem L'Kayin Ois, God made a sign for Kayim. What was the sign Hashem made for Kayin? The sign was the letter Vav. The letter Vav is the letter of life. Who is the epitome of life? David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. David is the essence of Vav. By the way, the middle letter of David is a Vav. And actually, if you connect two Dalids, you get a closed mem, which is the avodah of David HaMelech. But in any event, here at this point in time, when Klal Yisrael first arrive at the Arvos Moav, David is trapped in Moav. He's in there. Like the Medrash says, Matsasi es David Avdi. David was, so to speak, still hidden in Moav. So at this point of time, the Vav, David, is in the Arvos Moav. But as soon as Balak starts to build those Mizbeachs, Chazal say in the merit of those Mizbeachs, he was Zoiched that Rus should come out of him. So then that's the beginning of the process of the extraction of David. So now for the only time it says Arvos Vav, now David is fully there. But from here on, David is beginning to be extracted from the plains of Moav. In any event, so the Parsha begins, Zois Chukas HaTorah, which is the phenomenon of mi yitain tahar mitameh, and that's what we see in the end of the Parsha, that Klal Yisrael encamped by the Arvos Moav. Now, my friend, Rabbi Rafal Ansel of France, sent to me, the Abarbanel asks a very amazing question. Abarbanel asks, what in the world is the mitzvah of Paraduma doing in Parshas Chukas? It's in the wrong place. I thought Hashem gave us Paraduma in Mara. That was 39 years ago. And at the very least, it was given to us when the Torah was given on Har Sinai. But why is it mentioned here in the 40th year? What is Paraduma doing in this week's Parsha? It's 40 years too late. The Abarbanel says that no, now is the time that it's relevant. Now that Klal Yisrael is about to enter Eretz Yisrael, and Hashem knows that we're going to start battling and going to war, and we're going to go to war, there are casualties, so Hashem has to give us Paraduma. By the way, how does the Parsha end? The very first war of the Jewish people against Sichain and Og. So the Parsha begins with Paraduma. The reason why Paraduma we're commanded now is because now it becomes relevant because we're going to war. Oh, now we're going to war. What war? That's how the Parsha ends. The Parsha ends with the first war of the Jewish people with Sichain and Og. Okay. In the Sefer Pri Chaim of Reb Chaim Yaakov Safran, I saw this earlier in the week. He points out that, again, there's a very important connection between the Para Aduma, Zois Chukas HaTorah, and Vayaku Oisoi V'yasbanav V'yas Kol Amoy, to connect the beginning and the end of the Parsha. What's the connection between defeating Og and the Para Aduma? The Medrash says, very interestingly, in the Zechus that Avram Avinu said, V'anoichi Afar Va'efer, Klal Yisrael was Zoicha to the Paraduma. Avram said, V'anoichi Afar Va'efer, in the merit of Efer, we're Zoicha to the Efer HaPara. What did Avram Avinu, when did he say V'anoichi Afar Va'efer? He said, I should have been Efer in the war of the fork in Ur Kasdim, that I was saved from the fire. And when should I have been dust from in the war of the four kings? Now, how did Avram Avinu get involved in the four kings? Because the Pulit came and said, Lot was captured. Who's the Pulit? Og. So, because of Og, Avram Avinu should have been dust by the four kings. Hashem saved him from the Afar V'Efer. So the Parsha begins in the merit that Avram Avinu said, V'anoichi Afar Va'efer, I should have been Afar and Efer, we were Zoicha to the Paraduma. Why did Moshe kill Og? through the zechus of the Afar va'Efer, Klal Yisrael was zeicha to the Parah Aduma. This is the connection between the Parah Aduma and Mechemes Oig, because Oig was the one who wanted Avram Avinu to be Afar in the War of the Four Kings, and that we would never be able, Avram never would have said Va'anoichi Afar va'Efer. In other words, what's very interesting is, in the merit that Avram Avinu said Va'anoichi Afar va'Efer, we're zeicha to the Parah Aduma. Avram Avinu, when he said Va'anoichi Afar va'Efer, he meant he should have been wiped off by the four kings when Oig told him that Lot was captured. So there is a direct connection between the reason why Avram Avinu said Va'anoichi Afar va'Efer is, he said, look, I should have really been dust and ashes. Because of who? Because of Oig in the War of the Four Kings. So the Parsha ends, so to speak, connecting back the statement of Abraham, who said Va'anoichi Afar va'Efer, and connecting it to the war against Oig. Now, another interesting thing is on the word Zois Chukas HaTorah, V'yikchoi lecha Parah Aduma, and the Parsha ends that Moshe Rabbeinu killed Oig and his family. So Rav Safran says like this: the Efer of the Parah Aduma brings Ta'ara for Tamei Mesim. Or Chaim HaKadosh says that Klal Yisrael normally after their demise become Tamei. Why? Because they're very beloved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. During their life, the neshama is housed in the body, and therefore the holier something is, the more of a vacuum that's created when that holiness leaves. The Mashal, the Or Chaim HaKadosh says that on a dish of honey, a lot of gnats and mosquitoes and bugs come. Why? The sweeter something is, the more dirty and grimy it becomes when it's not sweet anymore. The nations of the world don't enjoy that level, that status. Only Klal Yisrael, who are the children of Hashem. So, in that case, because of the special status of Klal Yisrael, that we learned from the beginning of the Parsha, Moshe was authorized to do what he did to Oig and his children at the end of the Parsha. Okay. Or one more idea that this Sefer Pri Chaim, Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Safran says that the Zohar HaKadosh says, why was Moshe afraid to kill Oig at the end of the Parsha? So we learned in the Shiur this week, one of the reasons was because Oig saved Sarah's life. But another reason is Avraham Avinu gave Oig a bris milah. So it says, Al tira oisai. Don't be afraid of ois bris kodesh. Al tira oisai. But Moshe was afraid because Oig had oisai, the ois bris kodesh. Now, the beginning of the parsha is Zois Chukas HaTorah. The Chukah, we refer to bris milah as a chayk. The chayk b'she'eroi sam. And the purpose of bris milah is a hachana to Torah. We know that without bris milah, one is not capable of understanding Torah. The bris of the milah allows a person to comprehend the Torah. So the parsha begins Zois Chukas HaTorah, that the purpose of bris milah is to be able to understand Torah. Therefore Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Al tira oisai, don't be afraid of Oig, because even though he has a bris, but it never developed into Zois Chukas HaTorah. It never developed into his connection to Torah. So you don't have to be afraid of his bris milah, because the main purpose of the bris milah is to learn Torah. Okay, so these are a number of connections. By the way, the Pri Chaim says a couple of other connections between the beginning and the end of the Parsha. But I want to focus tonight on these primary connections. Number one, the Para Aduma is reminiscent of the phenomenon of mi yitain tahar mitame, extracting kedusha from tuma, which is what we see in the end of the parsha, be'arvois mayav, sweetening mayav with the extraction of David HaMelech. Then we saw from the Abarbanel that the reason why Para Aduma is mentioned here in Bamidbar in year 40 is because we need it now that we're going to war, and we said the war is mentioned at the very end of the parsha. Likewise, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of Oig's Mila. However, Hashem, the parsha begins that the purpose of the Mila of the Choik, Zois Chukas, is to connect a person to Torah. Therefore, since Oig remained unconnected, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have what to worry about. Okay, so that is offering number one for tonight.